You may have a lot number, but that lot could, theoretically, it could have different costs. Maybe not, but theoretically it could. But regardless, as you're moving material into production or within production even, then you're going to be dealing with different cost layers.
Yep.
For sure, right? Even though it's the same material, one lot or set of lots or serial numbers is going to have a different fundamental cost because the company did a price increase or whatever the case may be.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The lot and serial numbers strategies can help improve customer experience and traceability, but over-implementing lot and serial numbers might fire back with the increased overhead and admin efforts. In some industries, the lot numbers could be so involved that you might require multiple lot and serial numbers as part of the same product. There might also be requirements for different BOMs that may contain traceable assembly. So what are the best practices when it comes to implementing lot and serial numbers? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss lot and serial number control best practices. We discussed the layers of lot and serial numbers and how they might be different in different industries. Finally, we discussed the unique lot and serial number requirements of industries such as defense, pharma, and custom manufacturing. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to digital transformation. And we always have an expert panel here that is willing to share their insights and wisdom. For today, we are going to be discussing a very deep topic. This is going to be lot and serial control. Obviously, it's going to be very different across industries. So we are going to have fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. If you don't know me, I am your host, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Chris for his intro.
Thanks, Sam. Chris Gherardini, I'm the CEO of Turnkey Technologies. We're a 28-year-old Microsoft Dynamics ERP implementation partner. So love talking about serial, not trace, and all that good stuff. So thanks for having me.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. Mark Lilly, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks, Sam. My name is Mark Lilly, President and CEO of LillyWorks. The team here at LillyWorks have created several ERP systems and now focus on helping manufacturers solve the late problem. With that, it comes down to managing production in the best way possible. And certainly if you have requirements around serialization or lot control, that becomes just all the more challenging. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. And we obviously have a Mark problem today as well. And I don't know if you guys have slightly longer name, Markedo or whatever. But okay, probably I'm going to go with the last name. So Mark Keynes, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Mark Keynes. I'm the president of BlueLink ERP. We are the developer and implementer of the BlueLink ERP software. Play mostly in the distribution space and really interested in this topic because we work a lot with regulated products like food, pharmaceuticals, as well as consumer packaged goods. And as we'll unpack during the course of this discussion, there's a lot of stuff in this area happening right now in the pharmaceutical world. So I'm pretty excited to both talk about it, but also maybe learn about some things that we haven't figured out yet in that regard.
And when you talk about unpacking, I think that's going to be a pharmaceutical process as well. That could have impact on the lot and serial control. So we are going to discuss that as well. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. All right, guys. And if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. We typically try to cover them during the show. And if we run out of time, then we'll make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, I am going to start with Chris. And Chris, I think you are going to be here only for a short time. So we are hoping that you can kick us off overall in terms of setting the stage of what lot and serial control processes are and how they differ across the industries. Chris, over to you.
Sure. I appreciate that, Sam. And again, contextually, from an ERP perspective, serial lot trace is a requirement for a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries, and it varies. And again, as Mark and the Marks will tell you later, you'll see some deeper discussions. But from my perspective, as we think about different industries, think about just pure distribution. And why do we serialize and why do we trace? And sometimes it depends on, and again, it's by industry. What kind of product am I shipping? And again, serial number. Why? Warranty? Oh, okay. It's expensive. And I think even as you rationalize traceability by industry, you get to the point where you don't have a choice. And there's other areas where, okay, do I need to track this one? Do I need to track this one? And some of it is, warranty provisioning. Hey, what's your serial number? Okay, some people are a little lax or they don't care about serial numbers and trace and warranty. But as you get into controlled industries where we're tracing, and I've got a client that does tissue regeneration, and they bring bodies in the back door. You think about the traceability on, a human donor all the way through a process and where did it go and who's the patient. Granular, highly sensitive. If there's issues, you've got to be able to get on that. Different industries, foods, as we bring in raw materials, lots of product, lots of product, but a lot of product. And those lots typically are earmarked as well. And why is that important? Well, we're trace. If there's a problem down the road, hey, somebody got sick. Where'd the eggs come from? Where did this come from? The ability to figure out everybody that's impacted, all the products impacted. Again, that's another one of those rationales. But so let's broaden it up. If we think about typical operations, in our process where, hey, I need to pull inventory, and it really can start there with serialization. Is do you tell the person what serial number to pick, what lot number to pick? There's even processes surrounding how do you determine which one they should go get? Go get the oldest one, right? Or the lot tracking, it's food. This stuff's going to rot in 3 days if we don't use it. Get that first. So sometimes we're pushing out instructions on what specific serials lots to pull for to sell or to distribute. And again, sometimes it's based on a chronological component. On the complex manufacturing, people that are bringing in raw materials that have lot numbers and serial numbers, and they're consuming them into different levels of finished goods, you're going to hear at different degrees of trace. How do I know what went where? And how about a component that's got subcomponents that are serialized? And again, maybe it's a $1 million item and it's got a warranty. It's like, okay, what's the subcomponent? So even this, you're bringing all this stuff in inventory, and we talk about receiving and so forth and consuming. But imagine the complexities that continue to evolve. So I mentioned receiving, so capture. Capture is a big deal as you think about automation, and people that are doing serials can't do them by hand. It's impractical. And again, some serial numbers are 40 character SKUs. Wow, they're big numbers. So we go into barcoding, go into scanning, and then you go into, even the efficiencies in designing barcodes and scanning. You don't want to have to type anything in. Does the barcode have the item number? Does it have the serial number? Okay, great. Now we go into 2D barcodes where I want to scan a box that has 50 boxes in it. I've got another client that does dental equipment. Same thing. Their stuff's coming in the door that has a serial number on it, and then it comes with all the serial numbers of all the components. Now you're thinking, wow, that's a 2-level receipt. Most systems don't accommodate that type of consumption to bring it in and bring in all the subcomponent serials, land it in inventory, populate properly so that when I sell it, now I can track, warranty, trace. And this is a product they buy and resell. Somebody else makes it. But imagine the 2D, 2-level structure of serials and think about the complexities. Are they all matched right? And I know Mark and those guys will talk about manufacturing where, hey, I'm making 20 of these and there's 10 pieces in each one. And how do I know that serial went in this finished good? Or is it all a hodgepodge and we don't know? So the complexities and the systems capabilities, and Mark will tell us how we do that because I don't know. But again, a lot of examples there. So I talked about picking. I talked about scanning, the ability to use mobile devices to scan serials. That's the most efficient way to capture them into the system. Coming out the door, right? The guys are picking, they're scanning, they're consuming and manufacturing, same type of thing. We've got to be scanning. So if you're serial lot controlled, scanning's in your future there. Backside, using the information. So again, as you challenge the systems, usability, how's the trace work? Depending on your industry, you may have such a system. You could put in a serial number and says, oh, here's everybody got it. Do a mail merge, send them all a letter. It's a recall. Wow, that's a lot of automation around serial trace management, because you think about what if we have a problem, and if you're in an industry where you will have a situation to do recalls, you're going to look for those automation features around that trace recall that's going to help you automate the process as well and keep track of that. Because again, if you think about compliance, It's not just capture, it's not just getting them, but how do I manage the process when a problem does arise? So I can keep going, Sam. Like I said, I think I've touched on a lot of just different points, kind of like I usually do. But
Yeah, so great setup, and I don't know if you're going to have time for the follow-up question. You need
yeah,
to.
I do.
You do. Okay, all right. So let's do a little follow-up here, and I'm probably going to give you a little story here. And in my mind, when I look at the lot and serial control, there is a lot of discussion that need to go in. There's a lot of thinking that need to go in overall from the operations perspective, from process, from the financial perspective as well. Okay, sometimes we see that lot numbers are implemented way too much. Sometimes they just don't know how to implement it. And one story that I was discussing today, in this particular case, I'll probably name the ERP as well. And they bought Microsoft Business Central. And I'm like, okay, why did you buy? I bought it because this is the food and beverage. And this particular vendor has really good IP on top of that. And that's why I bought in the farm and egg industry. Okay. Then I'm like, okay, how did you implement it? And whether the implementation was successful or not. And they're like, no. So initially, when we started implementing, we were thinking that we are going to utilize everything that the system offered. But then, everything that we were doing more from the operational perspective, whether you talk about lot tracing, that was all sitting outside of the system. And I'm like, okay, so you built all of these SQL Server databases. That's what they were talking about. And they had to keep everything. And I'm like, I can almost guarantee that your lot traceability is probably not going to work. Okay. And again, it has nothing to do with the system. The way you implemented it, and you are calling this a success. In my mind, I don't think that's a success. So, Chris, over to you overall in terms of
sure. And because we do sell Business Central, and I know I could probably guess the food vendor, but I won't name names. But to that point is, if it's an embedded application, and I think as you look at bolt-ons, Business Central by itself, does it know about food? It does not. However, people do add-ons, and I think as you look at the selection of what do you plug in, because there are a lot of people say, oh, I got food for Business Central. Embedded means you can't tell where it stops and where it starts, which means the processes are continuous, they're fully integrated. You're not working with a third-party integrated solution. So to your point, the complexities of lot trace and serial trace have to be so invasive, they have to be embedded in the solution to really work effectively. Everything from receipt to consumption to visibility. I didn't mention allocating, right? Oh, do we allocate down to that level? So even managing stocks and allocations and consumption, again, you need it so close to the system. So I could see how that could be a problem. I'm curious what food vendor, I won't guess, but that is legitimate. As you look at systems technologies, you're looking for embedded. Again, otherwise, oh, I'm in this system or in this system. And I've got other clients on some of the legacy stuff where it's totally separate. And in the new world, it really converges into an embedded type of feature set that extends the application, if it's not extensively built, exclusively built for that. But what we see in most of the Dynamics platforms is their core, and then there's embedded technology that takes it to that level of personalization for that industry. So,
okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Chris, for
and
that.
I will sign off. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining in. Mark, Lily, and I'm coming to you. So overall, when we look at different industries and the industries that you operate in, obviously, there are going to be some micro verticals in your industries where you are really going to require the lot and serial number control. In my mind, when you are going to require that, then probably your life is going to be easier because you are going to have a little guidelines there in terms of what you can do, what you cannot do. So in implementation wise, it's probably easier because somebody is sort of enforcing that. No. You have to have lot number control at the packaging level. You have to have lot number control at the component level. But typically, when you are working with the devices or the products where the lot numbers or serial numbers are not really imposed, and then it becomes the decision making. Okay, shall I do it? Shall I not do it? If I need to do it, how complex or how detailed that needs to be so that I can get the business results. And that's where, in my mind, the business is a struggle. So, Mark, over to you in terms of whatever you have seen.
Yeah. So in terms of do we do it or not do it, certainly we come down to the piloting, right? Because they may have very grandiose ambitions about wanting to have everything down to the very detailed level, and then but once you get into a pilot, if everything's gone swimmingly and inventory transactions are just not a problem, and then adding on that additional burden of needing to include the serialized information. Because once you decide to go serialized or even lot control, right, for a group of parts or most of your parts, then there's no turning back, right? You have to provide that information from receipt of material And then every time you transact it, right, the system's going to require you to tell it, hey, which lot are you now issuing out to this work order, and that sort of thing. So, and then as we've talked about, then it can get deeper in terms of, I'm telling the system which heat number of material I'm issuing, or what sublot even of that heat I'm issuing. But do I also need to, and it knows what work order it's going into, right? But now what if I have to cross lots, right? So I've got two different heat numbers of material going into the same work order, right? So now you get to the level where, and the decision point where, is that good enough visibility, just that I know those two heats went into that work order, or do I need to specify that no, this heat went into these parts, right? If you get a work order for, say, a quantity of 10, so this one went into these 4 end items, and then this heat went into these 6 end items, right? And have the serialized for those. And we've been in manufacturers where this is the case, right? You've got and as you mentioned, and I think you started out saying, defense industry, and those heat numbers are critical, and you have to have the document too from the material supplier saying it's a certified heat number, and what it is, and that needs to be. So now you're talking about document control associated with lots of material, even down to the serialized level as well. And so it can get complex quickly. One of the things that is fascinating, Chris touched on it, is that multi-level structure, right? When you're building something complex, we're talking about a heat number, or even a serial number on a raw material coming in from a purchase order. But then once it goes into production, to what level of detail do you need to track that, right? So now it goes into a subassembly, and that subassembly may be serialized, and now that's going to go into another subassembly potentially, and then all the way up to the end item. So being able to track, not just what job or what sub jobs did this material go into, but really being able to track from at any level. I need to see this serial number, and where is it? Where did it come from, right? And what was used into it, and where did it go after it, and have that full visibility. And it's a lot. It's a lot to ask for in a system. But if you need that, then that's something you're going to want to have on your list when you review ERPs, for sure.
So very interesting details there. And since we have the short crew today, we can probably get into slightly more details, and that's what you guys probably want. You want more air time, right? So now there are 2 layers that we can pick on, Mark, in this one, and I'm talking to Mark Leary right now, right? So obviously the heat number, when you look at the heat number and when you look at the lot number. So I don't know whether listeners are going to be familiar with if there is any sort of correlation between your lot number and heat number. Sometimes there might be, sometimes there might not be. And then you also mentioned the document control. So when you are tracking the document at the heat number level versus the lot number level, right? There is going to be a different reporting from the different perspective. So let's talk in slightly more detail overall in terms of the correlation of the heat number with lot number and the document, as well as reporting at each level.
Sure. So it's typically, so a heat number is typically going to be the lot number, right? So here again, it comes to flexibility of the ERP and that sort of thing. But does the ERP should allow you to name what you're calling the lot number, right? So you could call it a lot number, you could call it a heat number, but and really a serial number is really just a special case of lot control. A serialized part is a lot of one, quantity of one, right? So for every quantity, and then you can certainly define, when you're doing lot control, you can certainly define, well, how many will I have in a lot, and those type of parameters, or not. Maybe your lot is a quantity of 2, maybe it's a quantity of 2,000, right? Whatever the case may be. But what's key is that's tracked when you're coming in on the incoming transactions.
Yeah, so very interesting layers there. So I completely agree overall when you say serial is basically lot of one, that is to uniquely identify a part, and typically that is going to be applicable in, Mark Haynes is probably going to talk about pharma industry, electronics industry, when you have to track each of the laptop, mouse, you have to track overall from the customer service perspective. That's where the serial number is going to be helpful. Lot number obviously is helpful for the group that you mentioned. Now, you also mentioned that group of two. If you are simply rebranding, renaming the lot number to heat number, that's a simple problem. But in my experience, I guess, when we were doing the other show, I think these guys were talking about, and I don't know if this happens in specific industries, there is another layer there. It's not simply renaming. So you are going to have lot, sublot, and then heat number is probably going to be attribute of sublot. So, and the correlation is different. It's not really one-to-one, I would say. If it were just renaming, then probably it would be easier. So I don't know, Mark Lilly, do you have any sort of follow-up comments there based on your experience?
Yeah, certainly. I think you need to choose one, whether it's the lot number or the heat number that's going to track the inventory and be prompted. Now you can have attributes, right? So an attribute may be what's the heat number of this lot, or vice versa. Right. Expiration date is a great example of an attribute, right? Shelf life, that sort of applying shelf life on an expiration date for an attribute. So that's the way typically I would see that handled in most ERPs.
Okay, amazing insights, and thank you so much. And guys, I mean, we are going to operate slightly differently just because we have a short crew. So now we can make it slightly more informal. If you guys have any comments, just speak out. That's number one. If you guys have any sort of stories that you can share based on whatever comments were mentioned, you can also ask me questions if you have to. Okay. So yeah, we are all part of the same panel. So Mark, I'll give you the question, but if you have any questions for me, any of you, please feel free to ask as well. So now, Mark Haynes, I'm looking from you is going to be overall. I know that pharma is very different in general. And, I typically struggle when I'm looking at any of the vanilla ERP, and I'm pretty sure you are probably going to agree with this, that it becomes very, very, very hard to manage the layers that you have to manage for the pharma in any of the vanilla ERP systems. Sometimes it might be okay, but you are probably going to be taking a lot of shortcuts. And sometimes you might claim that you have traceability, but you are probably not going to have that. Nobody's going to know because nobody's probably auditing, and even auditors are probably not going to be as deep, as smart. So somehow the world is running. But we all know that there is fundamental problems there, right? So Mark Haynes, when you look at the pharma traceability, it's really, really deep in my mind, and you require very specialized linking of different numbers that typically go in your lot and serial control. So do you want to talk about that, Mark Haynes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd like to just jump in first and say that, I think, we work I've got experience in a lot of different industries. Pharmaceuticals is one of them. And I always look at it from start off with the point of view of, why do we care about traceability? What is the motivation behind it? What do we need to be able to do when an event occurs that requires us to trace or track something? And you kind of if you work from there as your starting point, you actually will have, to some degree, different solutions or different implementations of the same solution for different industries, and even within the same industry. So like the food industry, for example, food distribution industry, it's very, very different if you're just bringing in boxes of granola bars and you're shipping them out. Yeah, you need to trace those lot numbers. But if you're bringing in bags of sugar and bags of coconut and mixing them together to create sweetened coconut, I think that's actually a thing, by the way, but I'm not sure. Then that gives you a whole different sort of potential requirement for what you have to, the reasons why you may have to trace something and what it is you're tracing. So, I mean, Sam, to talk about your specific question about the pharmaceutical industry, it is a little bit of a special case. I mean, some of the traceability needs that a typical pharmaceutical distributor has are going to be very similar to particularly food distributors and other perishable goods distributors. And we can talk about those, we can touch on those briefly, but then they have some very, very almost unique. I think there are some other medical fields where they're similar, but there are almost unique requirements, and they're changing all the time and becoming more sophisticated.
Yep.
So yeah. So from a more generic perspective, I mean, one of the things that you'd want to be able to do in terms of tracking and tracing is being able, with any kind of perishable good, is being able to understand and know kind of what Mark said, but in a slightly different context, the shelf life, so the expiry or best before date. If you're selling products that are going to expire, you want to know that so you can, first of all, as Chris said earlier on, try and ship them out in a first in, first out basis based on expiry date, but also so that, for example, maybe you want to offer your customers a deal, a discount on what we'll call short dated products that have a shorter expiry or best before dates. So now, does your system support that? Does your system support telling you where to go in the warehouse to pick the oldest lots first before you ship them out? Or do you have to go around looking for them? Well, clearly, that's not a winning strategy. What about you're selling product online to your customers? Do you want to be able to give the customer an option of getting a discount if they'll buy a product that's going to expire in the next, say, 8 weeks rather than a longer dated product? Well, if you do, then your systems better be able to actually render that data and manage it appropriately. So I think those are some examples of generic things. Generic reason why you might want to trace something. Great examples here in Canada last month. So two quick examples. Unilever Canada issued a voluntary nationwide recall of select dry shampoos because of possible carcinogenic ingredients.
Yeah.
They released a comprehensive list of all of the lot numbers, and you can actually, if you are one of their customers, you can get those lot numbers in electronic format. So if you have a good ERP system that does proper lot tracking and traceability, you could just import those into your system, and your system should be able to spit out for you, number one, what do you still have in stock that you've got to pull off the shelves? And number two, which customers did you sell which items to, so you can automatically shoot a notification to those customers. Well, guess what? The vast majority of their customers don't have a good system and are manually running around their warehouse trying to find those lot numbers. And we've got a customer in the food distribution industry that had a similar thing. In 2014, there was a big peanut recall. And they had chosen not to implement lot tracking on a few of the products because it was a pain to input the data, because those products did not have lot numbers embedded in any kind of scannable format. So they would have had to manually capture the data. They chose not to. When the peanut recall happened, whatever they saved on not keying in that data, they lost multiple times over by running around trying to find lots, trying to run through paperwork to try and figure out who they sold which products to, so they could alert customers and then comply with and survive an audit by Health Canada on how they handled the recall. So, pretty soon after that, they started dealing with lots. But yeah, in the pharmaceutical industry we're going to get into right now, it gets a lot more complicated than this. I should say much more complicated to avoid the ambiguity of the word lot.
Yeah.
In this context, but it gets much more complicated. And one thing that Chris said, which is super important, is that scanning.
Yeah.
If you are not able to scan 2D data matrix barcodes, and I'm happy, Sam, if you think as a follow-up question, we can delve a little bit more into like what do we mean by data matrix barcodes and how does this stuff all work?
Yeah.
But if you cannot do that, don't get into the pharmaceutical distribution industry, people. Just don't do it. It's not going to work for you. There's always been a very important need from an FDA perspective to be able to track not just where each lot of a particular drug is, but where it came from and where it went to.
Yeah.
The traditional method was called the drug pedigree. That require you to be able to understand and keep track and keep records of, for example, if you're buying and selling aspirin, every lot that came in and every lot that went out. Not as difficult as not as complicated as one may think, because you may buy, I don't know, 1,000 bottles of aspirin in 1,000 bottle case packs, but they're all in the same lot number, so you're just really tracking one lot number with X quantity. But now there is a new regulation that becomes mandatory in November 2023, and all the manufacturers and distributors are working towards it, which requires each individual saleable container at the lowest saleable container level to be serialized. So in my example, each one of those bottles of aspirin is going to have its own unique serial number, and the entire movement history of that bottle from when it was manufactured for when it was handed over the counter to you at the dispensary at the pharmacy has to be tracked electronically and be able to be audited and recalled for FDA and other regulatory purposes on a pretty much instantaneous basis, and has to be maintained for a minimum of 6 years, potentially more, just depending on the certain other characteristics and aspects. So think about this. You order, you're a big distributor and you order 10,000 bottles of aspirin from your manufacturer, and each one of those has a different serial number. Are you going to go and scan data matrix barcodes for each of those 10,000 bottles? Well, clearly you're not going to do that, right? So there are a number of different tools and subtleties around this. And I'm going to share some of them with you in a short sort of high-level discussion. But if you do not have a proper integrated system that handles this electronically with both scanning and electronically communicating bidirectionally with your suppliers and with your customers, there's no way that you can comply with this regulation. It's not possible. Unless you're doing a tiny volume of transactions, in which case maybe you could somehow record this manually somewhere. But effectively, you have the notion of aggregation and inference. So aggregation means I can take those 100 bottles of, I'm the manufacturer. Manufacturer level, I can take those 100 bottles of aspirin, 100 different serial numbers, put them in a pack of 100, slap a label, a barcode, a 2D data matrix a label on that encodes all of those 100 individual serial numbers that are inside that. Then I can take those cases of 100 and I can stack 10 of them on a level of a pallet and do the same thing, aggregate those into another barcode, 2D barcode. Then I can stack a vertical pallet and do the same thing again. So when my supplier ships those products to me, my supplier has to trade with me. So if I'm the distributor now, the manufacturer ships those products to me. The manufacturer has to electronically send me the information of what's being shipped. I have to electronically scan and verify on receipt that that's what I receive. I can optionally just scan the high-level barcode. I could scan that one barcode on the pallet and have 10,000 bottles of aspirin automatically dumped into my system. But the responsibility, if there's any errors, then lies with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So typically what I'm realistically going to do is I'm going to open some of those packs and I'm going to scan individual units to verify that they're there. And I'm going to scan some of those. I'm going to open one or two of those 100 packs and scan the individual bottles and make sure that they reconcile. And then after I've done that, I'm then going to scan the master barcode, and your system, your ERP system, is going to have to say, wait, you already scanned some of these serial numbers. I'm just now going to supplement the rest and not double count the ones that you scanned individually, right? Mm-hmm. So your inference has to allow for basically partial teardown of serial numbers on receiving. And also keep in mind that in that same pallet, you could be mixing lot numbers and expiry dates as well. Okay.
So is that like a sampling? Are you doing kind of like a sampling, or is it a tear down in the sense that you're actually shipping some of that before you've scanned in the whole?
Well, I mean, realistically, it could be either, Mark. It's actually a really good question. It could be either because potentially once you've scanned those eaches, let's say, for example, then number one, the system knows about them, so you could now potentially ship them. Mm-hmm. We'll get to what you have to do before you can ship them, though. It's not as simple as just cross-docking is not going to be a thing anymore in pharmaceutical distribution.
Yeah.
But the possibility of, tearing down part of it and then putting it away and then dealing with the rest of it later is fine. Because again, if your inventory system is able to understand that, okay, I've already dealt with those, so I've got to subtract them from the master scan. When I do the inference, when I infer the serial numbers from the higher level 2D data matrix barcode, I've got to account for the fact that some of those have already been taken out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You also there's a practical thing. If you're a distributor and you typically don't break things down to individual bottles, you send out those 100 packs. You're not going to want to break the packaging on that and tear down. So you're pretty much going to have to trust what you got from the manufacturer, or else spoil some of the outer packaging of the products that you're going to sell. So there is a little bit of a complication. There are a lot of discussions still going on within the DSCSA and within a lot of the companies and organizations that are preparing for this or but the other side of that is that when you ship out product, so you're the distributor, you're going to ship it out to a hospital or a smaller distributor, a sub-distributor, or pharmacy or whatever. Same thing. You have to be able to scan what you're shipping out. By now, you probably do trust the outer 2D data matrix, but you have to be able to scan what you're shipping out and then trade that information electronically in this format called EPCIS, so that your downstream customer can grab that data electronically and then do the same thing, perform their verification, etc. So it would seem like, well, at least there is a standard. It's called EPCIS. For some reason, everybody calls it EPIX, but it's actually EPCIS. So there is a standard. So it should be simple. Like, every single file that you get, whether you get it from manufacturer, from ABC, or whichever manufacturer you get it from Pfizer, it's going to be the same format. Well, no, it's not. It's going to be different for each one of them. So whichever technology companies are going to be assembling and disassembling these EPCIS files, are going to have to be able to deal with multiple different nuances and subtleties and file formats from pretty much each of the major manufacturers. And that's kind of going on right now in terms of trying to, people trying to get those things set up and tested and verified. It's not that different if you've been around long enough, for those who've been around long enough, from some of the EDI stuff that was going on in the, I'm going to say early to late 80s and early 90s maybe, where there was an EDI standard, except every single major retailer used it completely different, so there was no EDI standard. Like there was an 850, but every single company's 850 looked completely different. They still do to some degree today, but I mean, it was way worse back then. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think that those are some of the things. But the good news is, once this is all in place and assuming it's working and everybody, all the companies in the supply chain for pharmaceutical have got the right systems in place, the good news is that this stuff should actually save those pharmaceutical distributors, depending on their size and scale, a fair amount of manual work compared to what they're currently doing, and potentially, reduce the need for headcount, increase the scalability without hiring additional people in the warehouse. And it'll also improve, I think, the level of discipline particularly in some of the smaller distributors, where up to now it's been easier to be indisciplined. And I mean, that affects all of us, because obviously at the end of the day, we're the people who are going to the pharmacies and buying these, OTC drugs or getting prescriptions filled and stuff. And we're the ones that are at risk if something goes wrong in that supply chain. So I guess that's the good news. And sorry, I've kind of gone on and on about the pharmaceutical side of things, but it is one of those. It's the only industry that I've personally seen where the need to be able to manage things by a lot and the need to be able to manage things by serial numbers within those lots are distinct and different. Yeah. The reason we track the serial number is different than the reason we track the lot number. The lot number is for expiry, for overall generic manufacturing defect product recalls. The bottle traceability, serial traceability, is largely for basically criminal activity, and for regulatory policing, if you like.
Yeah, so some very interesting comments there. And Mark, Lily, I don't know if you're going to have any sort of follow-up question. I do want to touch on this question from the guest, and you all both can offer your commentary. I am going to read it and going to offer a little bit of my commentary as well on this question, and then you guys can follow up. So here, Richard is asking, by the way, follow Richard Hulton. He's amazing, obviously. So here he is asking, lot serial control significantly complicates everything to do. And I'm going to have to agree with him. Sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't, but it does complicate things. To do with inventory management and control, it can require a complete rethink. You are so right on warehouse architecture. So right. Could not agree more, because everything is just connected together. The way your warehouse architecture is going to be, the way you are handling lots, I mean, it could go either way. Again, it's a lot of trial and error, the analysis of your processes, how you want to design. It's not something you take on lightly. I have seen many business attempt it and wish they hadn't. Could not agree more. I have worked in environments where it was non-negotiable. So right, aerospace and pharmaceutical. So Mark, you are getting a shout out here, but I have spent a fair bit of time in F&B, food and beverage, and you'd be surprised how few businesses do lot serial traceability in that environment. And by the way, even if they are doing it, it might not be right. Okay. Even if everything is traceable in the system is never your one-to-one with your physical processes. Okay. There are always challenges with that. So I don't know how this world is running. But I'll let you guys offer the commentary. Markley, do you want to start? You have not.
Sure. Yeah. Like a lot of things in life, right? There are trade-offs, right? And certainly, if you need, obviously, if it's regulatory and it's required for your industry, then you're going to need to do it, and you're doing it one way or another now. It might be on paper, like we've talked about, but you're doing it. If it's one of those things that, hey, might be nice to have, then you gotta weigh those options, right? So and you've got to weigh the risk of the recall, right? Classic, but really in general having that depth of visibility, right? And is it worth the additional overhead in the day-to-day inventory transactions? And it can be a lot. It can be daunting. I think we've all seen, you've had some folks who are going from ERP to a different ERP, and then you have others who it's their first ERP, and I mean it was paper and Excel before, and just going live with the ERP just on basic inventory transactions, like just the idea of you don't just go over to the stockroom, grab stuff, and throw it into production. No, now we need to actually do an issue transaction, right? To record that we're doing that, right? And that's the least of it. So that in and of itself can be daunting, let alone the fact that as you're doing that, you've got to go maybe several layers deeper and actually deal with the heat number, the serial numbers, and the rest of the attributes that goes along with that. Did we scan and attach the document into the serial number, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it can be a lot. Again, but once you have it all in one place, it's really nice to have when the stuff hits the fan and you've got to go dig that out quickly, probably, if there was a problem, and be able to track that down can be a huge, as Mark was saying, huge time and money saver for sure. One of the other things is that we've touched on here and there, but that's costing, right? Costing of the serial numbers and the lot numbers, and kind of like you were referring to in the last question, Sam. It kind of puts in another layer, because you may have a lot number, but that lot could theoretically it could have different costs. Maybe not, but theoretically it could. But regardless, as you're moving material into production or within production even, then you're going to be dealing with different cost layers. Yep. For sure, right? Even though it's the same material, one lot or set of lots or serial numbers is going to have a different fundamental cost, because the company did a price increase or whatever the case may be. And that's aside from, precious, right? If precious metals are involved, then that's just inherent in the beast. So now you've got the same material and as part of lots or serialized but with different cost structures. So having that visibility, and especially if you're a custom manufacturer, you're doing one-offs in particular, average cost is really the way to go. That's what you want. That's what you want from a visibility standpoint. So being able to do that is really critical to see overall what did it cost me to build this thing, right? And even from a an analysis of how did I do in terms of my margin and my profitability.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great comments, Mark Keynes. Any questions for Mark Lilly? Any insight on this comment? If you're speaking, you're on mute.
It's only about the 8th time today I've been caught doing that, guy. So Richard, I just wanted to say that I'm probably the exception to the rule in what you said. I would not be surprised how few businesses do lot serial traceability in the food and beverage, because I've been in a lot of them, and we even have some of them as customers that we kind of drag protestingly to the holy grail of actually being able to do product recalls. But yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason for that is, as Mark Lilly said, is that it's fairly complicated, adds extra cycles to your entire inventory transaction process, and particularly when you do not have the ability to scan lot numbers on the way in, it can complicate things. I mean, there are solutions around that to some degree. For example, if you can get your supplier to transmit you electronically the lot numbers that they're shipping, even if it's just in a CSV file or whatever, and you can then generate your own barcode labels upon receipt, then that kind of makes it a little bit easier to deal with. But yes, there are a lot of companies in the F&B industry that do not. There are a lot of them that actually simply record lot numbers on the way out, not on the way in. So at least that way, they do have some way of dealing with the customer side of traceability and recalls. But what's in their warehouse is walk around and look and hope you find the right solution to that. But Mark made an interesting point that I haven't thought about for a long time, and that's around the costing. And most companies that in my experience, that do lot tracking, we'll leave serial numbers separate for now. But in terms of lot tracking, most companies that, in my experience, tend to use either first in, first out, or average costing, and not specific lot costing. But I have definitely encountered a few that use specific lot costing, and I mean that does change the dynamic in a lot of areas of your business. And you got to have a really, really good business reason for doing that, because it makes your life a lot more difficult. And then you have the issue of you purchase product from a supplier. Let's say you buy directly from the manufacturer, and let's say it's food or whatever. And they send you lot number ABC123. And then 2 weeks later, you get another shipment, and there's some more lot ABC123. But now, in the meantime, the price has changed. So now you have products from the same lot, but they have two different costs. So now your software needs to, which hopefully most software does, but your software needs to support lot splitting. So basically, maybe you'd call it internal versus external lot numbers. So it's the same external or manufacturer's lot number, but two different internal lot numbers. But now you've got to add that into your thinking in terms of when you go and choose what you're selling and allocating and picking and packing. So yes, I've seen it. Not a big fan of it, because I've still yet to hear a compelling business reason for doing that. It sounds compelling to the business owners. I've never been convinced as yet.
So just to be clear, and Mark Lilly, you can offer your insight as well. I think what Mark Lilly was trying to say, and I don't think there is going to be a costing method that is going to be, hey, track by lots. So obviously your FIFO, LIFO, average costing, all of those costing layers are going to be from the costing perspective. But I think what Mark Lilly implied to say is that the cost between your lots could be different. The way your inventory might be organized or costed. Mark Lilly, do you have any sort of insight there by any chance?
Yeah, I think it's the same just at a simple part level, right? Yeah. So I mean, just for one part, you can have different. So they're different cost layers, right? FIFO layers essentially. So are you tracking is the system tracking the FIFO layers in inventory just out of the box? Now you add lot numbers to it, right? And now it can become more complex. And then the question is, do I want to track it, still just at the part bucket level? I don't care what lot it's assigned to when I issue it out. Just take FIFO on the part level, or do I want to track it, the cost specific to the lot, even within the part number construct? So I think it becomes more the manufacturers that I've seen care about this are the very custom ones, right? Exactly. They're making one-offs or something that's very custom. So when they go to analyze how much did this cost me, they're not taking costs from stuff that actually went over there. It's all the costs that truly tracked into that specific device or set of devices that they made for someone.
Yeah, could not agree more. And the other difference, I guess, is going to be between your distribution and manufacturing. And Mark Haynes, I think this particular setup is really for the manufacturing, where they are delivering a lot of different custom products. And here the driver is, the cost is far more important than your traceability. In this particular case, traceability could be important as well. Let's say if you are doing something for oil and gas and it is going in some sort of boiler and they require you to produce some sort of certificate, sure, your traceability is going to be important. But what is more important is, okay, each of your custom job could have, let's say, $100,000 difference in those two if you sort of mix it up, right? So that's why the costing argument becomes very important and critical overall in the manufacturing setup than distribution. And especially if you are talking about regulated distribution, in that the traceability could be far more important. So Markins, I don't know if you're going to have any sort of follow-up commentary there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. It is a big distinction. Again, my comments really were relating to companies that are in distribution. And I mean, because again, I was trying to say that I've seen some fairly unfortunate outcomes of trying to get too granular with your specific product costing and then paying salespeople a commission based on margin, but incentivizing your salespeople to not sell that particular lot number, so it just sits there forever because it came in at a higher cost. Just think about that. And yeah. So yeah, but it's interesting. Something you said there just it made me think, Sam, of we're talking about traceability and lot numbers and serial numbers. So obviously, the mind immediately jumps to manufacturing. It jumps to pharmaceutical or food or things where there's regulatory stuff. But there are a lot of other industries where being able to track things, serial numbers fairly obvious. It's usually, as you say, electronics. You want warranty on your TV, you better know the serial number. So as the supplier, you better know when that person bought that serial number, because maybe they bought it 5 years ago and not last week or something. So those kinds of things are obvious. But with particularly with lot or batch control, there are a lot of other uses. I mean, one of the ones that I see a lot is color matching. So companies that are in the textile industry, for example, or certain types of upstream apparel industries, you're particularly, like take example a flooring supplier that provides hardwood flooring to contractors or to builders that build, subdivisions or condominium buildings. Yes, it's this particular color hardwood, but this particular color from a different batch from the same manufacturer will have a subtle difference. So I need to know if I'm supplying hardwood of, whatever you call it, I don't know, rustic brown to this particular builder for this particular development. I need to know, first of all, that it was that development for that builder, but I need to know the manufacturer's batch so that if there is any shortage or damages and they want to replace, we can try and get from the exact same batch to get an exact color match. Now, there's no other reason other than being able to do the color match. So again, is it worth my while as a distributor to go through the overhead of tracking those manufacturer batch numbers purely for that color match purposes? And that's a decision you have to make based on how important that is to your customers and also how much swing, clout those customers have with you. But I've seen variations of that as well. I've seen variations of even things like there are different generations of the same product that are the same on the outside, have the same price, if you like, or selling price level for customers, but there are slight differences, particularly if they're electronics, with some of the interior workings or some of the parts or even the firmware, and they use lot numbers or batch numbers to control that so that they have a better idea of if there's a problem with the firmware, which generation it was. It's probably not the ideal way, but again, if you're dealing with a fairly small, unsophisticated distributor, that may be the only realistic way they have of tracking that kind of thing. So there are a lot of, those don't really go to traceability, but they do go to lot control, uses of lot control that are outside of what we normally think of, but they're out there and they've been used quite a lot.
Okay, so very interesting. And it's very interesting you are bringing this example. And the reason for that is because that is typically called matrix inventory. And that goes through a very different planning cycle. That has a lot more layers overall from the inventory perspective. So the industries that you are mentioning, if you talk about apparel, and sometimes when they talk about ERP, for them, ERP is completely different. Okay, for them, ERP is just going to be accounting, to be honest. They don't even understand the operational processes of ERP. Typically, if you talk about the inventory, allocation, order management, that all resides inside your WMS. Okay, so for them, it's very, very, very different. And typically, they don't even have the SKU number. They call it as PLU. It's called price lookup code. Mm-hmm. And price lookup code is going to have 3 or 4 different variations. Number 1, it's going to be your color, size, season, style. What am I missing here? And these layers are going to be pretty much across the processes. When you start your design, you are starting from your design, and that's almost like your raw material. And then you are going to have all of these 5 layers that goes through your, starting from your acquisition to planning, including your sampling. Okay, that is going to be there as well. And typically, Mark, these processes, and if you go to bigger systems such as your Blue Yonder, they all try to keep all of this order information inside WMS and ERP, some sort of backend system. Hey, I'll pass you GL entries and that's it. Your job is just to account for this. You guys don't hang out here in the warehouse. So, it's a very different dynamic in the industry. So I don't know, you guys are going to have any follow-up comments?
Well, I mean, I'll just say that I totally agree with you about apparel, particularly if you're talking about apparel manufacturing, then you're in a really different world altogether. Maybe not so much with the smaller apparel distributors. You do need a product matrix for sure. That's given for your color side to automate the color side. That being said, like just to pick up on some like Richard's comment earlier about you'd be surprised how few business do lot traceability in the food business. You'd be surprised how many apparel distributors do not have any kind of a product matrix. And so if they've got one style that has 10 sizes and 10 colors, yeah, they manually create 100 SKUs in like QuickBooks or something. Yeah. And then it's only sold for like 6 months because it's seasonal, and then they've got to scrap those 100 SKUs and start again. And let's say they have 10 different styles. Now you've got 1,000 SKUs, and it goes from there. Yeah. So I mean, on the distribution side, particularly with the smaller companies, I see that a lot. But again, just the color matching is not an issue with finished apparel. The color matching is much more an issue around things like, as I say, carpeting suppliers and things like that. But they also potentially have the need for product matrix. So what you were talking about on the warehouse side of things kind of ties into this as well. If you're even if you're just a large distributor of, let's say, again, flooring, you probably have a WMS. Your WMS is handling the fact that you've got different sizes, different widths in this case, of hardwood flooring in different colors, and there's a matrix there as well. But you're also at the WMS level tracking which batch number because of the color matching thing. So now you're right, it doesn't affect your ERP, it affects your WMS. But it's the same concept. You're using batching mostly for being able to get an exact match.
Could not agree more. So, guys, the only thing we can take right now is going to be closing advice. Mark Lilly, I'll start with you. What would be your closing advice for today?
Sure, I'd say evaluate those trade-offs, right? Whether it's the need to do a quick recall, certainly, right? What's ultimately the level of risk you're carrying for not having all that serialized and the gazintas information in one place, so you're not spending days or weeks trying to hunt paper down through different filing cabinets should the worst type of scenario happen. Just in terms of it, I do want to add this comment. We had one client that was really keen on having visibility of where each physical serialized part was or is in production right now. So this was frankly a new one on me, and they used a feature that we support called divergence, where you're tracking the material flow and the quantities through a series of operations could be 5, 10. In one case, they gave us an example of where it was literally 40, like 42 or something, right? And then at a certain operation, they wanted it to split off into individual like quantities of one, but 40 times. And then there were, for each of those parts, there was like 6 operations that needed to be done. So it literally split off into 40 legs, if you will, each with the 6 operations, so that they could see exactly where each serialized part was through that process of the 6 operations at a glance. So that was a new one for me. I hadn't seen anybody who was really excited to go to that level, but I was happy we could support it. So short of that, that and certainly the costing is the costing at a serialized or lot level important for you. Those are the types of conversations I'd have.
Okay, amazing. Love that story. Thank you so much, Mark. Mark, quick closing advice.
Yeah, I'll just say that if you are in a position where you do have to account for and track serial numbers and lot numbers, and your products some of your products do not come from your supplier with 2D data matrix barcodes, force them to do that or find another supplier. You got to scan them.
Okay, amazing advice. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. So that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another topic. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Mark Lilly, head over to lillyworks.com. It's LILLYWORKS.com. If you want to learn more about Chris Garadini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's CORNKYTEC.com. If you want to learn more about Mark Keynes, head over to bluelinkerp.com. It's BLUELINKERP.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Abu Asif, who shares his insights into the processes of cannabis businesses in Canada. Also the interview with Dave Dozer, who shares his insights into the business process nuances for oil and gas suppliers. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.